Hello again. Welcome to another edition of the Brattlecast. I'm Jordan Rich with, of course, Ken Gloss, the proprietor of the famous Brattle bookshop in Boston, known worldwide in movies, on television screens, and certainly people love to go to the store. Ken, it's great to see you as always. And today we're going to focus on something that you and I definitely grew up with, and that is almanacs.
Sort of what we grew up with. One of the things that I know in the last few years has been in the news a lot is that the Farmers Almanac is discontinuing publication. But of course, for me, anything that recent doesn't make that much difference in a way. But I recently went to a library in a state where we bought boxes of old almanacs. And what I thought would be fun is one that I have in front of me right now is an almanac from 1826. So we're only 200 years out of date. And I figured that wouldn't be a problem. And then in this collection, I don't have it right in front of me anymore because we had one that was 250 years out of date. 1776, printed in Boston. One of the things that I find fascinating at looking at these, an almanac is obviously something that you have. It gets you statistics, tells you about the weather. You know, the weather didn't sound that much different in 1826. And I have to admit that I will say that probably the predictions are a little more accurate now. They were predicting cold weather, windy weather, snowy weather. And of course, Farmers Almanac in 1826 was predicting it for the whole New England area. The other thing that is very fascinating about these, not only holding a 200-year-old almanac with a very nice engraving on the front, and then it was Boston, but you start looking at what they considered important. I'll tell you, there was a very fascinating article that I'm sure everybody needs to know now. It's how to, let's see, the exact title is Preventing Dogs from Killing Sheep. I mean, that's something that comes up every day now. 200 years ago on a farm in the New England area, that was a major item. Also, cutting down decayed fruit trees. But what it really makes you realize is 200 years ago, the Farmer's Almanac really was an almanac for farmers. It wasn't sort of, as it progressed over the years and changed, something becoming for the city and just weather predictions. The other things that it really is fascinating, and actually I'm going to talk about this a little in another podcast, but it also tells you where all the depots are, where the stops are on the coach lines. And this is 200 years old. What distances it is between towns, what days the coach comes. You really sort of, it takes you into another world. The other thing that you run into with almanacs, I have another 1826 almanac, and it's the Christian Almanac. And although a lot of the information there 200 years ago is very similar, the engraving on the front is a picture of a minister preaching to a group of people under trees. The trees look very much to be tropical. And then there are whole articles in here about missionaries and their work. So you can see the differences. One was definitely for farmers. Another one was more religious in nature, more for ministers. But it really gives you a little, when you start reading these things, it sort of brings you back to the time. It brings you back to what were people looking at? What were they concerned about? What were people writing about in these almanacs that they thought would draw people in to buy their almanac? So it's fun. You hold it. The other thing is that a lot of people think, well, a 200-year-old almanac, how can you hold it? How can you touch it? How can you read it? Well, the reality is 200 years ago, before mass production and manufacturing, paper was much, much better than it is now. It was also more expensive. So this paper will probably last another 200 years as opposed to some of the newsprint used nowadays.
Obviously, almanacs evolved over the years to include sports data, celebrity, birthdays, historical events, so forth and so on. We're talking 1826, so we're talking probably not a lot of that, I'm guessing.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it tells you in the front here when Benjamin Franklin was born and what date. It tells you when George Washington was born. I no, they, different celebrities, different names, obviously earlier dates, but no, they got the Farmers Almanac. Wanted you to know that. It also talks about different places in the world, and you also have to figure that a lot of the places in the world now, we have a concept either through the movies, television, radio, photography of what it looked like. And a lot of these almanacs give verbal descriptions, but it seemed like, I mean, it's places that nobody ever conceived that they were probably ever going to go to.
This is well, I don't know if it's exactly pre-photography, but it's pretty close, right? 1826?
It's pre-photography. I mean, the photography that started in the 1830s it was pre what we think of as photography. That really got going more towards the Civil War and after that.
Right. So did you find this almanac among a big collection of almanacs, or did you find this as a standalone?
There were boxes and boxes of almanacs that we bought in one collection. And for the podcast, I thought it would be fun. Pick 1826. I couldn't put my hand immediately on a 1926. I did find a 1776. And of course, there's a tremendous thing about exhibits and everything going on with the 250th, which would be 250 years ago. And they're fascinating. Now, I have to admit, I love these. I love the history. I love the feeling going back, but I also love selling them. And the Farmers Almanac started in the 1700s, late 1700s, but they were probably one of the most popular, and they sell well, but there's lots of them. And then there were different types there were anti-slavery almanacs that we had. There were the Christian or religious almanacs. There were medical almanacs. It was a quick, easy way of getting things out. But what really struck me, and the best one, was this one from 1776. I mean, it was printed in Boston. Inside the almanac, it had the weather, it had distances, it had everything, and it had all through the whole almanac, on every page, an account of the Battle of Lexington and Concord.
So they were covering, almost in a news fashion, what was going on the battlefield.
Well, yeah, it was about 8 months later.
Yeah,
but still, they were covering it. But the other thing that was fascinating about that almanac, it was printed by a man named Isaiah Thomas. And Isaiah Thomas was a newspaper almanac publisher, and he was from Boston, but he was also a patriot. And at that same time, the British were coming in to occupy Boston. So he had to flee all the way to Worcester to be safe. And then he set up his presses out there. After the revolution was over, he set up an institution called the American Antiquarian Society, which has one of the greatest collections of newspapers in the United States. So it's funny, you get a box of almanacs, you start looking through them. Almost every one of them, you could stop and say, look at this, look at how the medical was. There's something interesting. And of course, they were written to be interesting, but then you start getting the country's history, and you're getting it at the time it was done. And overall, it gives you a little bit of what it was like to be around at these specific times.
Exactly. It's a magical mystery tour. You don't know what you're going to find, but place in time and history that it represents. It's really cool.
And the other thing is, like these Farmers Almanacs, they can sell in the $20, $25 range. A few of them go into the hundreds, not the farmers. So then you also have like the ones that deal in the Revolutionary War go into the thousands of dollars, but they're accessible. You can go in, walk in, buy a 200-year-old almanac for $25, and what a talking piece.
And is this because they were printed in multiple copies back then, or
Yeah,
in other words,
they were printed in large numbers, and when you really think of it, a lot of people saved almanacs. Libraries had almanacs that they got each year and preserved, and some of those libraries now they need room for computers, which in a way give you the same information nowadays that the almanacs were trying to distribute in their day 200 years ago.
well, I, for one, still like to hold a book in my hands. And when it comes to things like almanacs, they're still printed today, the World Almanac and others. I love holding one, but you're holding one from 1826, which I think is a little more special.
But it also makes me think of somebody 100 years from now or 200 years from now, that one that you're holding or looking at today might look at that one the same way I'm looking at this Farmer's Almanac.
Well, time will tell, I guess.
Time will tell, exactly.
Ken, as always, a delight to be with you, and your stories continue to wow me, and I know they wow the audience. Thank you so much.
Well, actually, Jordan, I see that the coach to Newton, I'm going to visit my daughter, is coming in shortly. So I've got to run out and catch the coach and the horse.
Catch the coach, absolutely. It might take you a little longer.
Here.
It might take you a little longer than an Uber, but it's probably a fun ride.
Exactly.